windows and take out the trash.
So this is all she's studying, whatever, check out the next work is making. Oh, this is not my party, they just don't, this is, she's the host.
Could I maybe set the stage? Peggy and I just had a little brief. Is it a safe assumption to know, for you to know that there is already in existence a referral process in your faculty handbook? I know some of you use it, but
I think you should, could you just briefly go over the points of the steps? Because I don't think everybody clearly understands that.
I even have extra copies for you.
Wow.
Is that the short version?
Yeah, this is the short version. This is the non-lawyer version. I just want to point out that this, I think, could be a very helpful document for you. It talks about many of the things that Peggy has very, very nicely covered, I think in an excellent way. What is the new student profile here? Not so much in statistics, but we are getting a more verbally aggressive, a more demanding, sometimes even more physically challenging student here. We're getting more therapy referrals. We're getting more halfway house referrals. We're getting more work release program people. We're getting an awful lot of folks that we normally did not get before. There's some information in here on classroom management. Many of the things that, in fact, Peggy covered far more than even here about your role as an instructor and setting the stage, being the role, establishing these things up front, standing your ground in terms of the classroom behavior. There's also some information in here on FERPA, the Family Education Rights to Privacy Act. What information can or cannot you release to a student? And one that you're most likely, the specific area, student problem areas. Peggy has again done an excellent job on identifying them. But what do you do if you have a student that has emotional problems in class, or you suspect emotional problems? Distinguishing that from a disciplinary problem, and how do you take care of a disciplinary problem? And if you really need to bring the closure real quick with the campus police, in other words, the referral methodologies are in here. If you're making a referral to the counseling center, there's a form that we'd like you to fill out in here that simply helps identify the behavior so that the counselor who will get back to you can help have a better understanding of really what's going on, may come to visit in the classroom. I want to really make an effort to say that we do not operate in the send them to the guidance office routine or send them to the vice principal's routine. This is not a high school. We're not staffed to be able to simply pick up on that. Everyone has their own responsibility to play in this. But if you are going to make a referral to the counseling center, we need to have some help on identifying what the problem is. If it's a disciplinary problem, I need to know from a dean's point of view what this person's doing in your class. I need some statement from you as to the behavior so that I can put it against the student code of conduct and take the appropriate actions in there. If it's a referral to the campus police, I'll get a police report on it within a day or two. So in essence, we've already got a complaint system started at that point for disciplinary. This is available to you. It's in the handbook. Extra copies up here. Use this as the framework for working with a number of things that Peggy has presented.
I want to clarify, when I said call the counseling office, I didn't mean it in the context of sending a student there. I meant call to talk with a professional who may have some experience in dealing with this, not necessarily to do the therapy themselves, but to help you figure out what you can do in the classroom, what kind of referral to make. Or you can call me for that, saying I'm not doing therapy with them either, but I can help you decide how you want to handle it, what you need to do next. So that's why I mentioned the counseling office and discipline in terms of student services. If there's a disciplinary problem violating the code of conduct, call Dr. Taylor so they can get that procedure.
Call up to June 30th.
Yes.
After June 30th, I don't know where you're going to call.
Howard, could you elaborate a little bit more on referrals from outside agencies as far as
No, I'm not sure when they have that. We don't know either. There's no pro forma agreement, something like that. We have no more idea who these students are than you are. But in the referral process, we have worked with 2 or 3 of the psychiatric hospitals in the area that we have in. Now, we used to have written memorandum of agreement with. We have verbal understandings now. We can make direct referrals there. Or in the case of a real suicidal or crisis situation, we can get a crisis intervener on campus within a half hour. We use the United Way referral, information referral for all the agencies. There are some agencies that work better than others. Some, you have to also maybe choose some agencies that fit the other characteristics of the student. There may be other problems involved in there too. We don't maintain a list of, here's 20 therapists, choose one kind of thing. We normally refer to agency, and then the agency will then determine who might see somebody. Here at the institution, there's very little therapeutic process. It's more stabilization and referral out. There are 5 counselors here. None of the counselors are mental health, neither am I. Mental health qualified, not clinical trained, but we've worked sufficiently with referral services in order to do that. Or we can help identify sources for you.
We also, students that are referred, we have some brochures and also cards for contacts. A lot of times the students that we serve, we've got a population, can you hear me now? We've got a population of students sometimes we also, because of insurance, will want to know where they can go if they don't have the money. So we have a referral list for that. Just to refer to.
Wendy did mention one other thing too. Anybody, and there's an excellent crisis hotline in the area. It's in the front page of the phone book, and that will get you immediately connected with a crisis counselor. The student can call, or you can call for information, but ideally you want to get the student to call, and they will then normally do an evaluation and make a referral at that point. So if you can just even get them connected with a telephone call to a hotline, that's one good step in the right direction.
I think I have a phone number I can give you guys. I'm going to jot it down. It's the emergency services number for the community services board, mental health department. There's an emergency number. Let me see if I can find it.
And the Community Services Board and Contact Peninsula are probably the 2 status contact.
Yeah, I'm not doing here it is. For emergency services, if you've got somebody psychotic or suicidal, it's 245-5529. And in general, just for making a referral to get them into the referral process or the intake process, the number is 825-1690. So for emergencies, 245-5529, and just non-emergency, 825-1690. And that's not the crisis intervention hotline, that's a mental health emergency services.
Is that what you have to do for youth?
Yeah, I don't have
So if we
that.
have them who are living in Williamsburg or outside of the area, would Hampton take that call initially, or would they
They'll
say, I'm
probably
sorry?
they'll probably give you the number of the Williamsburg.
the Colonial
Services Board.
I mean, I've got that number in my office, but I don't have it.
Yeah, all those agencies should have one another's number, so just having one should get you into the right network.
If I would have a student who is very threatening in class, what would be the best way to contact campus police without the situation escalating? Especially in my classrooms, I'm in the back of the class with the door on the other side, so I couldn't slip out. If somebody was threatening another student or me in the classroom, what would be an appropriate way to call for help?
During the evening or at night? I mean, during the day?
During the day.
During the day? You will probably, if you're that concerned, is have another student in the
one out each semester. I said you might pick one out at the beginning of the semester, each semester, you know, and say if we have problems, I'll make a sign to you, you head out the door.
Continuing on that, what about at night? And it's, you know, where does the student call from?
Well, good question.
Especially at night, you know, the offices aren't open.
If you go to any payphone and dial 911, it'll go directly to Hampton Dispatch, who in turn will contact us. If you don't know the cellular phone number, I can give it to you.
The police officers in the evening have a cellular phone. You can contact them. The evening facilitator, you also need to be aware, and maybe you don't, there is a designated evening administrator on duty each night till 9:30 who has a cellular phone number and is in direct contact with the campus police during the evening. The trick is to get to a phone, and I think probably what we need to do is do what you and I can get a full card out or something like that.
What is the evening administrator's phone number?
Well, that's what I said, we need to have that handed out specifically so you have both of them. I don't have it right off hand right now.
Because I know I've tried to locate the evening administrator at times. Can't do it.
On the cell phone?
Well, I don't know the number.
Yeah, if you don't know the number, you're out of luck.
I know. And if if a student went into the main office, is the campus police phone number posted in every office so that they could call campus police, the student? Or if it's a faculty member who doesn't know the phone number? I guess I
Well,
should.
campus police office is in the telephone directory. However, one of the things that has just come up is the evening police number and the evening facilitator number will now be in all the directories. That was not in before. We've only run one cycle of the evening facilitator, and I'll get you those numbers before we leave today. So you have.
It wasn't too long ago that these little green cards were in our boxes, at least in one
Got a
division.
paycheck, I believe.
That,
Do that.
Oh, I don't know.
it's the campus number and with the cell phone number, etc. And in point of fact, I've used it. The place where telephones are really scarce and where the classrooms are set up as adult classrooms, that is to say, the entranceway is in the back of the room, but the telephones are scarce also, is over in the ITT building.
Right.
The doorways are set up as adult classrooms, where over on the main campus, they are set up in the opposing situation. So over in the ITT building, the instructors are in the wrong end of the doorway.
I have a question about, I guess what we were sort of mentioning earlier, Dave, but the legal ramifications of when you have a disruptive student in class and you ask them to please cease and desist, whether it's privately after class one day or maybe at a particular time and place, and they just won't. So you get campus police to sort it out, or they go to the dean, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you can even answer this for us here, David, but I mean, legally the student wants to turn around and sue you as an individual, as an instructor at Thomas Nelson, because you denied them access to their educations. I mean, we know it's absurd, but in this, like today's day and age of ours, we have people who are like that.
You know, and my answer used to be, I don't know what it is here, $68. For $68, anybody can be sued. Whether they recover or not is a whole different story. But, you know, sometimes we look at it, we're too sensitive to the issue of one. I mean, at the same time, we have an obligation to provide, we have students coming here that are paying to come here. We have as equal a legal obligation to provide a classroom that is free from distraction and a good, wholesome learning type environment. And if one student is becoming disruptive to the point where it is affecting the education of these other students, generally speaking, there's not a lot of litigation, but the ones that we have seen, the courts tend to rule on the side of the instructor trying to provide a wholesome learning environment that's conducive to the free flow exchange of information. So I would agree with everything that Darren said. I mean, if you have a disruptive influence, I think you almost need to, one, document it, and two, start the ball rolling somehow so that there's some type of intervention. It doesn't necessarily have to go too far initially, but you need to start building that paper trail so that down the road there are other options available. It's very hard to do things if you keep ignoring it, and then finally one major episode comes and they try to take disciplinary action to expel a student, but there's no track record of it, or there's nothing documented. And I know that by referring it, by calling the chief or calling campus police or something, at least there's documentation getting on file that you notice this problem, this thing is taking place, something's happening.
I know we've had a number of student episodes over the years. What actually are the sanctions, and if you've got the numbers, I think you probably do, Howard, because there haven't been that many that have actually been expelled or suspended, but how many versus how many complaints or episodes occur?
Good question. I can only give you, let's say, an experience of a year's worth. Gary happened to have, I guess he and I had the pleasure of working on disciplinary committees together, but it seems like about every other day there is a complaint. I've got 2 file drawers full of what I call bad boy and bad girl files that exist. How many get actually disciplinarily suspended or expelled is probably a small handful, and I would have to say that all those that do certainly deserve it. Maybe a better way to answer that is to tell you how a disciplinary case is handled. Much of the disciplinary cases that I run into are largely what Peggy pointed out, are immaturity, lack of understanding of the rules. Somebody needs to basically set them straight. And typically, when a complaint is filed, I will bring the person in and I will have a talk with them and usually talk about what student code of conduct they have in fact allegedly broken. Explain to them the process and usually give them a couple options. Most folks opt for the right options. For example, yes, I think it might be a good idea that I go back to that instructor and apologize for my behavior, and I think it might be good that I don't do that anymore in that class. Usually I try to give a one free chance. Usually a letter goes out to the student that says, you've chosen this course of action. If any other further incidents occur, I will initiate the disciplinary action we agreed on before, which usually is going to either be a suspension or some other kind of one that they worst fear the most is simply flagging the records. Can't register, can't get your grades, can't get anything. No release of transcripts. Your employer's now affected and everything else. But I think in the course of the last year, there's been 1 expulsion, maybe 2 or 3, 4 suspensions, a few other odds and ends like not allowing to participate in clubs and activities. I use a lot of probation. They're on probation for 6 months, on probation for a year. If any further event occurs, it goes to suspension. And I have had relatively few repeat offenders back in. And if they come back in, they're automatic at that point in time. We've set the stage for it. Total number, I don't know. I've probably seen 70, 80, 90 cases in the last year. How many of you were? Every time he sends me one, it's another case. For a population of 7,000 students, probably not too bad. And I think we're pretty lucky in the sense that we don't have what I call real serious problems on campus. We have a lot of verbalization problems, but we have, I think, been very, very lucky about not having any physical problems on campus. although I have to admit that we should hold our breath at times.
Do we have any kind of student conduct policy on campus? I mean, in regards to like, no foul language or? I'm thinking of what we saw Paul yesterday, Peggy, those just raked all over each other.
In the center of the college catalog is a student code of conduct. It identifies all those behaviors that are in essence not allowed. Obscene language is one, disruptive behavior, failure to follow the instructions of an instructor in the classroom. Good things like typically theft and destruction of property, plagiarism and cheating. I was trying to look to see if I can see one of my favorite.
That's what I mean, yeah, I mean, after you see them making out in the hall, it's like high school, I feel like we're going, go get some more.
more now this year, all years of it.
You have
And
to
they
speak
won't
to that.
stop. You made a comment and I made a
That's the
comment
code
and they
for the
laughed
court.
along. They were all over each other.
Well,
I-
and in terms of the mental health issues that I shared with you, that could be some histrionic behavior where I'm gonna kiss and let the world see me all over, we're all over each other and we wanna make a display of ourselves.
Or you just wait for her when class was over, because I was coming back down the hall when your class was letting me, she's out there all and.
Well, there's that behavior. There is the, what I call the crummy lounging behavior. You see students sleeping on campus. You see a lot of, let's just call them boisterous groups, blocking hallways and things like that. That's a phenomena that has basically occurred in the last couple of years.
Across the culture. I mean, you see it in malls, you see it in all kinds of inappropriate places. What's the suggestion for us here at Thomas Nelson? I don't think ignoring it is.
Well, that's, for one thing, that's why a police officer is now in the cafeteria and makes the rounds over there to break up these little clusters. Now, roving folks, you can't be everywhere at every time. You also have certainly acting on behalf of school authorities say, we need to have you move on or you're disrupting my class. Would you please move down the hall in a positive but polite way? I think oftentimes most folks are hesitant to step in. But on the other hand, if we don't all take our step, waiting for someone else to do it, it will just continue to probably become a worst case scenario. But it is part of the culture changes that we're dealing with.
I think the main thing is that if you see something that you think is unwanted behavior on the campus, that you should go ahead and just contact campus police. Because in reality, we know a lot of these things will work so forth, asking people to do certain things, and in most part, they will do that. We have a lot of good students out here, but we also have some students out here that will hurt you. I'm not going to pull anything and hold. They will hurt you. I don't want to see anyone get hurt. So, if you have something occurring that you think is not right, just give us a call and we'll respond.
You were saying something about suspension of students, and I don't know that, would that be like for part of a semester? Or would that be for like part of the semester?
Typically, if I suspend them, it's for a full academic system.
Okay, because the question I was going to ask is do we have to be required to do the makeup work or that type of thing that's suspended? You're not talking about just missing a couple of weeks.
I guess let me talk in two different ways. A lot depends on what the nature of the offense is and where we are in the year. If it is a situation that really warrants them not being in your classroom again, they're pulled out. They basically, even we can just say, you're out of this class, period. And you can do a withdrawal for extenuating circumstances or award a grade, whatever the case may be. In many cases, the student will opt to drop out, given the other circumstances that they're facing. Or if it's towards the end of the semester, it will be simply, okay, you cannot come back for 1 semester, 2 semesters, and before you come back and see me. In almost every case, these students' records are flagged with a note that says see Nina students, so that if they want to come back to this school, they will, at least the way I operate it, they will have to come into the dean's office. I will review their status with them, remind them of what their obligation is, remind them why they left here in the first place, and set the expectations that at least I have for them in the future. Now, a lot of students don't opt to come back, and yeah, enrollment is important, but I think we ought to enroll the right students and not worry about the other students. And in some cases where they're expelled, that's a permanent entry on their transcript, and they're permanently flagged at that.
Will they be permitted to take that instructor's class again?
The question was, would they be permitted to take that instructor's class again? If the student's legitimately allowed to come back in and to be a student, yeah, there's no restriction on what they would take. Now, common sense would dictate that if I had a run-in with a student, run-in with a faculty member, and it netted me some punishment, I probably wouldn't want to go back in that classroom again.
Well, there was a case of that, and I was just
There's
wondering.
nothing to restrict them from doing it. There's just no way to monitor that kind of process. The assumption is that they're allowed back in school, they should be good citizens and do their thing. I know one of the things that the counseling center is working very, very diligently on in orientation is this general notion of civility, proper behavior, expectations in the classroom. Again, this wasn't a problem 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Most of you have been around. I think the typical classroom interaction was, it reminds me of that classic study, late 40s, they made a list of all the rank order of problems in school. Running in the hallway, talking in class, chewing gum, and the list now, 2 years ago, was drugs, rape, assault, guns, you name it. The escalation, and we're mirroring what our society is. People don't anymore you shake a finger. Nobody shakes a finger anymore. It's usually you reach in and pull out whatever you've got that you're using. It isn't even in verbalization form anymore in many cases. Again, I think we've got a pretty good student population out here, but there are, in fact, some factors out here that I think all of us would probably not want to see, but we're an open door policy, and unless there's something that says you cannot, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't deny a felon access to an education. There's no law that says you can deny the accounts.
I know that there's a movement afoot nationally to let communities know when someone is coming into the community that might pose a danger, predators with children and things like that. At least 3 times in the last 20 years, I have had a convicted murderer in my classroom. And I only knew it because either I had read it in the paper or I had had a family member that was experienced with the system and knew that person was. I felt that I should have been warned that this person was short-tempered, had a history of violence. In one case, it was an advisee who kept arguing to me with me late in the afternoon when there was no one around to make his schedule out. And is there any way in which we can...
I don't know, because we don't know either. There is no, I received no list, the school receives no list that says these following individuals are...
Most of that legislation you're talking about deals with known violent sex offenders because pedophiles are considered predators. It's a predatory type disability that we really don't rehabilitate. And I haven't seen any apply generally to felons across the board. Most of it is a specific legislation either applying to child molesting pedophile types or perhaps in the domestic violence where the And perhaps the only other one I've seen is the victims have a notification when the person's being released from prison. If you were the victim of this person, he was sent away, he is now being released. There are some states and some legislation out there that the victim gets notified, but a general notifying the public of a release of an individual convicted of a felony, I don't think you're going to see it stand up to Supreme Court scrutiny. I mean,
Well, what about within the college community? I mean, if Roosevelt happened to know that this guy is very violent, prone toward violence toward women, does the law say that he can't let us know?
depends on how the chief finds out. I mean, that's I mean, it's fairly confidential information that he's privy to. His disclosing confidential information. And when I was in the DA's office, we could not disclose what we knew, even though we had access to case files. It's not public knowledge. The conviction of a crime is a public record, but the circumstances surrounding it and the details and the facts and all that are not public record. And there has been litigation where agencies have been sued by the individual or something for, disclosing that information. It's a real kind of touchy area.
It seems to me if it's in the daily press and I'm reading about it, and I just happen to be combing the little fine print, and I pick it up, how can that be private information?
No, that would be fine. And if the Daily Press ran an article and we had a system and people wanted to post that or disseminate that information, that's fine. But you go into the VCJS computer systems and run convictions, or go into NCIC and run convictions, and cross-reference our student enrollment list against convicted felons or something, you just can't do that. That's pretty much withheld confidential information.
If campus police knows about do you know about some of these people?
Some of them.
Okay. Do you keep an eye on them, sorta? Sorta. Okay.
Somewhat.
Okay.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you contradicted yourself. I thought you said that convictions are public knowledge.
The fact that a person's been convicted, you
Okay.
can go look it up.
Right.
Okay.
So what would be wrong with running a database of convictions against our students?
Because what are you going to do with
Public
it?
knowledge.
You can't deny an education because
No,
of
we're
it.
not saying they can't come as be students, but so nobody has to tell us the details. They can tell us they've been convicted. We can be notified this person's been convicted of this, that, and the other thing. That's public knowledge. Why can't we be told?
Because you may treat them differently.
I guess it would have to be on a statewide basis. I mean, but yeah, get the Supreme Court to change, being able to run
Well,
databases.
just because one
against-
person reads in the newspaper and somebody else doesn't read the paper that day.
That's
I
right,
mean,
it's
it's like,
may not
I'll
know
just
because
call
they
you
didn't
guys.
see the paper.
Right.
But if it's public knowledge, then for those.
Well, that's why it's in the newspaper, because, the press goes down and gets it, or the press
Yes, so for
monitors the
example,
trial.
they have people who will not know it because they didn't see the paper, but that kind of information, even were made available to others, the same person, to the person who didn't read the paper. Or they get the information.
I guess you could, but I mean, then you get in a situation where you're gonna compile this for years and, check your rosters every semester to see if any of these people are registered in your classes.
It's hard enough time running grades slow.
Right, and a lot of it is predicated upon, what are you gonna do with the information anyhow? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. You cannot deny a person education based on the fact that they have a felony conviction. You can't deny a pedophile education. You could have a pedophile registered at the school, and there's nothing, they have a right, if they have paid their dues, so to speak, and if they are released from prison, the assumption is they're rehabilitated or safe enough or whatever, to be released back into the community. It becomes, kind of information without a...
Draw an analogy though, when you go to get your driver's license, or when you apply for a state job. There's a place on there that says, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense, including speeding? And every time I put down the 2 speeding tickets I've had, and I assume that's a matter of record, at least in my personnel office. And the way the personnel office operates at most places, a lot of people get to review those files as people come up for appointments, promotions, or whatever.
But you see, there's a reason for that, okay? And we couldn't justify putting that on our application at a college. The reason that that's been upheld in the court system is if you're applying for a state job, you may have access to a state vehicle.
Okay, what about
Okay, if
applying
you're
for a
applying-
driver's license?
If you're
in the
applying for a
state?
driver's license is a privilege. You don't have a right to it. We can deny that to you. We can deny you a driver's license predicated on certain things. Education, it's been ruled we cannot deny you the right to an education predicated upon a prior conviction.
But then you're saying that transfers to include you can notify people of a suspected problem?
Well, there are a lot of notification groups out there. That's how a lot of these grassroots efforts get going. But I think the
Is the
Supreme
problem
Court
the
would
state
really have
agency
a
then?
problem with state money going
Right.
through a state institution to fund a position, to have someone using state computer time to run checks of information that are, and that's why it just doesn't happen, because there's no good useful purpose. If we could deny admission, and if that was legal, then there'd be a reason for knowing the information. But we're not going to deny admission because it's been ruled we can't deny admission. The reason we want to know about your driver's license is because we can deny you the right to have a driver's license.
I'll give you a good example. In the last 3 weeks in the dean's office, I've had 3 requests from local correctional city farm type things. Please send me your catalog and application. I wish to use Thomas Nelson Community College as part of my educational plan for applying for my parole.
For parole.
I submit,
You know that Williamsburg campus, that's the new jail up there.
But I don't think anyone wants to deny them education or access to education. But it's just that the instructor or the teacher might find him or herself in a situation with this individual based on grades or going over tests or whatever.
Well, that's, and to plug my talk, that's why you want to be aware of some of the warning signs of problems, of aggression or mental illness. And you want to be treating everybody carefully and nicely in general, so as not to take the average person off, but to recognize what are the red flags that this person could become violent, or maybe does have a mood disorder where like that they might snap. So I'd be a little apprehensive about having labels attached to people. This one's a murderer, this one's a convicted, this or that, because we are going to treat them differently, as Marlene said. Pygmalion effect. We've seen classic studies on that. You label kids one way, and you treat them very differently just based on that label. So I would be scared to have that kind of label even attached.
You're better off.
You're going to meet people in the supermarket who are convicted felons too. You might bump their cart by mistake and they want to kill you. Yeah, I don't mean to be flip about it. I appreciate what you're saying and your concern, but I'd be real worried about knowing every convicted felon and everybody who's a criminal and everybody who's this or that, because I'm definitely going to treat them differently. I'm human. I'm going to have a reaction to that.
And that's why the laws are situated that way. You're better off with what she went through in the lecture as far as looking for the telltale signs in an individual. This person may not even be a convicted felon yet, and they are more capable of doing harm to you than the person that is a convicted felon. And a lot of the reasons the court cases and the laws are set up the way they are is that stigmatism that attaches, and they are just not going to, unless you can justify a reason for having a person's record, i.e. law enforcement, and you're going to give them a gun and swear that as an officer or something, they're not going to give you access to that.
I was just going to say, I submit that you probably really don't want to know. The world is a dangerous enough place in the first place, and if you do know that these people are in there, then you're walking around like Dr. Norwood with her balloon that hasn't popped yet. Now you're walking around with this free-floating anxiety that this person is going to do something. The other thing is that if, as Dr. Norwood says, if you start treating them different, and given the human condition, chances are you will, and then you give them a bad grade, then you're going to find that they're going to come back and say, you knew about this and you were discriminating against me because of my record, and that's the person that's going to come back. We're litigation happy as all get out in this country, and that'll be the person that will ricochet. I mean,
It gives them
I think
more
Dr.
ammunition.
Norwood's point about keep your eyes and ears open, pay attention to what's going on, and be ready to bail out when the place turns on fire.
And if I can add to that, document.
Document.
I think it's just a changing world. I've really come to that harsh reality of where I make little notes myself all the time. Remember that day, David, I was doing general advising outside our area in our division, and this man who just was an impossible nut, for lack of a better way to describe him, noticed you were in your office, I think your door was partially open, and I ran to him immediately, and I said, did you get any part of that conversation? And happily he did, the whole world put up because the man was shouting so loudly at the time. And I said, please make a note of this, just mentally make a note. Because then I went in my office and just jotted down the man's name and the time and just a few general things in case it ever came back. And I mean, it's absurd that we should have to waste our time doing this, but I think you really need to for your own protection. If someone were to come back and say, well, that woman was rude.
And I would add to that, there isn't a single employee on this campus that needs to be abused by anybody.
It wasn't abused, that's right.
We use the financial aid office and the counseling center and admissions are all areas that seem to have this massive attraction for students who are upset, irate, argumentative. Your approach is polite, positive up to a point. If they start to use foul language, if they start to get any kind of aggressive, you just say time out at that point in time. If you can't control yourself, I will call the campus police and we will have you escorted out. Usually 9 out of 10 times that'll quiet things down. You getting aggressive back to them and getting into a fight does not do any good at all. The point of keeping your distance, being polite, being consistent, but you don't need to be abused by anybody. And you can stand your ground firmly on that and let that matter be referred to the office manager, the account manager, whoever is the next line of authority. I think everybody is aware, we're human ourselves too, that a lot of times when you get into these I demand treatment kinds of things, if you allow it to be escalated one level up so that the person feels that they have won their battle, even if they get told the same thing by the next level of supervision, it usually satisfies them. Because they're attacking you on a level that they think is an equal level, and the next level up usually solves it, even if it's the same thing said. But the point is that you got an agitated individual running around, and you don't need to be sworn at, you don't need to be threatened, you don't need to have any aggressive behavior to you at all. It's simply not tolerated. Before I forget, I do have those numbers if you want to jot them down. The evening facilitator is on duty from 5 o'clock until 9:30 on those evenings that classes are in session, Monday through Thursday. Those of you that have Friday night classes, I'm sorry, but there aren't enough administrators to go around, I guess. That number is 570-2460. 570-2460. Evening administrator has a cellular phone with them. They normally are either in their office or making rounds on campus. That's a number to contact. And the evening campus police number, the cellular phone number for the police officer on duty that evening. And this is after 5 o'clock. Either one of these cell phones go on until 5. 879-3649. 879-3649 is the campus police in the evening. In an emergency, hit 911. You can get connected just as fast. And in essence, with the dispatch, there's other resources available at that point too.
Howard?
Yeah.
Just to add, we have asked that night faculty, the night police number be part of the list of telephone numbers that we hand out. So they just hadn't thought about it. It will be on the next printing. It's one of those things that it will be right in your hands for everybody, even those who are not here. That number will be readily available.
And I think just going back to the telephone numbers again, the two comments I'd like to reinforce is if you're in a classroom, you ought to know where the nearest phone is for your class, just as sort of a tuck in the back of your mind. If it's in the evening, where's the nearest payphone? If it's during the day, where's the nearest office at? And I like Barbara's idea, Marlene's idea, maybe having a student or two as sort of your on-call runner. Somebody that may have you've worked with before that you know is a reasonable student who's willing to help out and take responsibility. And in essence, a little bit of preparedness maybe help. Gary, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just have an observation. It's usually when you want to call the police, it's because you need them right then. And you may not even have time to look through to see if it's under police, campus police, or whatever. I think it's one of those numbers that maybe should be excerpted and highlighted at the top, right before even general information. And I know on the internal house list, it's not that way, and in the, well, of course, you probably wouldn't be looking through the yellow pages for that, or in the white pages for businesses and that, but it's not, it doesn't stand out like it probably needs to.
A sticker on the phone would be helpful.
Well,
Well,
that little green card.
There should be.
That's where mine.
There should be on every one of your phones, a little red tag at the bottom. It says 2810, which is the daytime number.
That's right. But some of us are here at night sometimes.
The other thing that you may want to remember too is that we have an evening switchboard operator. So if you were to just call the operator number, that person can also potentially cancel.
And that's open until 9:30 also.
You would just dial the regular switchboard.
One last question, right?
2 years ago, I had a parole officer contact me for information on a student. And I didn't have any way of knowing whether that person was a parole officer or not, and send him to campus police. Should we speak with people who identify themselves as parole officers if we do have the student that they inquire about in class, or what kind of identification should we require?
In my opinion, unless it's like a written, usually what I see for parole and probation, if they want you to do something because they're doing a report, they'll send you something in writing for you to fill out or something along those lines, you know.
Release of information.
Yeah, release of information type situation. If somebody were to do that, to be honest with you, I would refer to, you know, the chief. I mean, he can certainly check and see if their credentials are valid. If they are who they say, you know, with the callback number and all that, that's probably something faculty doesn't really need to get involved in. The chief, you know, or some of his officers can certainly check that out and confirm the information. But most of the time, as a prosecutor, when we used to send out information, we would send it in letter form asking you to fill out all this information and then send it back to us officially. And if you even question that, refer over to campus police.
There's confidentiality of student records. I can't just release my grades.
Right.
Unless the student is on permission.
Right. So that's why you probably don't even want to get involved in that as opposed to referring it, you know, to the chief, and he'll come back and say, yes, this is valid, we're going to give them the records or whatever. They can do it through administrative handling that as opposed to just calling the teacher directly.
That's what I did, but I also have received phone calls since then identifying, saying this is so-and-so and so's parole officer, and I told them I would not disclose any information.
You know, I'll tell you, there's a lot of scams out there like debt collection services and private investigators and stuff like that, trying to locate people that use those employees.
The other question I have is not exactly related to student behavior, but if a student's parents call and wish to receive information on whether their son or daughter is in class on a particular day, we don't disclose that either, is that correct?
Over 18, that's their personal information, and they can't release it. We run into a problem like that all the time. Somebody will call the dean's office and say, I have an emergency, I need to get in contact with such and such. And we go through a fairly lengthy screening just to confirm that it is an emergency. Because a lot of times, one close call of some parent trying to retrieve their child from their estranged spouse. And you need to be careful. I would say if you have any inquiries about the character of anybody, unless you get a reference and they tell you about it up front, refer it either to the admissions office or to the chief's office. Sally Markello does all the certification and verification of student enrollment because it has to have an official seal on it and go forward. You will get an awful lot of other folks calling you for information. Naval Intelligence Service, Defense Intelligence Agency, background checks and everything else, but that should all be up front. You should know about that when it occurs.
Yeah, if it's one of your students applying, they're going to come to you and say, I've applied for this position. They're going to be contacting you because I listed you as a reference. FBI calls or NIS calls and says, we're doing a check on so-and-so. But even them, most of them send out a questionnaire, an official questionnaire that you have to fill out and send back because that goes as a part of this person's background file. When in doubt, call the chief. Call the chief's office.
I have a comment for the chief. Something that, this comes out of my 21 years in law enforcement, chief. There's a small discourtesy that's floating around that it might be helpful to go back to some of the departments around about and remind them. The off-duty officers who are coming to class occasionally with their off-duty weapons. I see some of those around on the campus. I understand why they're there, etc., but it might be wise to remind those departments that their officers might want to identify themselves to the instructors, because it is a little disconcerting if you see a sidearm on and off, in an individual's possession. I mean, some of them cross their legs, and all of a sudden you notice that there's the bulge down there from the ankle holster, or the guy that's wearing the jacket that you notice he's not sitting quite as far back because he's got it on the back belt. But it would be nice, number one, to know that so that you don't get that anxiety attack because you spot the gun. Number two, to know that in point of fact there is a law enforcement officer in your class potentially. And the third thing is that so that when other students are going like that, I think the reciprocity in some of the departments is not as good as it might be.
Well taken.
Well, I need to go, I have a base here, conflict.
All right, before everybody leaves, I mentioned the evening switchboard. If you will just dial the 2827 for the counseling center in the evenings, that will give you the evening switchboard.
Can you dial 2900 or not?
When you dial 0, it will roll over and it gives you a message to call. My technology does not allow the switchboard number to be forwarded. So dial counseling for evening work.
If you only have one quarter, it's frustrating.
There are copies of this up here if you'd like to get one.
Thank you all very
If
much.
you haven't done an evaluation, please come around and please put your chairs back like this.